So hi guys. Richie here with Toby, just kind of chilling over there. He just looked at me because I said his name. Uh I've had a day or so to process the movie. I saw Spider-Man No Way Home, and this isn't a review of Spider-Man No Way Home. If you want like just a quick no spoiler version, 10 out of 10 for me. Tied with Spider-Man 2 for my favorite live action Spider-Man movie. I still maintain the best Spider-Man movie of all time is Into the Spider-Verse. Uh, but yeah, I realized something, and I kind of wanted to share this with a lot of you, especially those of you that kind of look at the 90s and you have like this, man, things, they had all these cool things going on. And I'm like, there's some stuff you probably should know. Because I grew up in the 90s. I went to school and things in the 90s. And it's funny to look at things as they are now and realize that 20 years ago, it was not only was it not the norm, it was not cool. Um, and that's kind of what this is going to be about. And it's not necessarily just the 90s, there's other stuff too. But I grew up in a time where anime wasn't exactly well known. I was one of four people in my entire school that knew what Sailor Moon was. And considering how many people know what Sailor Moon is and things like that, like you don't understand quite what you've been through, like what I've been through, unless you've kind of walked in that. People who grew up with conventions, like if you grew up with conventions, you were like, oh, this is kind of cool. And maybe when you went back to school or everything, it was like, okay, yeah, people kind of make fun of me for anime, but like everybody knows what DBZ is. Even if you haven't watched it at this point, people know what Dragon Ball Z is. DBZ came out in the US around the time that I was like 17, 18, and Toonami started off around the time that I was 18. And don't get anything wrong here. There are lots of nerds everywhere. I was in Kamo in the army. That means communications, and there's a lot of nerds in communications. I got introduced to Studio Ghibli uh, through a friend of mine in Kamo, and yes, I pronounced it Ghibli, not Ghibli, because in Japan it's pronounced Ghibli, so I'm pronouncing it the way that it's pronounced in its country of origin. Um, but also at the same time, I'm not one of those people that say GIF. It's just it's GIF graphics. That's a hard point I will stand on. But like, and it's not just anime either. It was general nerd stuff. Like, uh, you would get picked on for talking about the X-Men or Spider-Man and like all these Marvel properties that are so mainstream now. You would get picked on and you would get bullied and things like that for knowing that stuff. I had like a trapper keeper of like trading cards that you could put together. There were like this set of 9 that all formed, you get this one character in each card, but they all kind of formed like this one collective scene. It was really cool. I love that stuff. I don't know what happened to all that stuff. There was a lot of trauma in my adolescence, and all that got thrown to the wayside in a way. Um, but yeah, I remember vividly getting picked on for being a nerd. And it's so weird because I'm one of those people that sat back after all the school trauma shit, and I finally found a group of people in the military that were nerdy like me. Comic books, anime, sci-fi, D&D. We did all of that in BDUs, in dress blues and greens. We were still hardcore nerds. We're some of the nerdiest people. Shout outs to McAndrews and Childers, to Seagraves, to so many other nerds. Shout out to Fong. He introduced me to Final Fantasy through Final Fantasy VIII. He was just playing this video game, and I was sitting on the couch watching. I was like, and I'm just watching the story, and of course, he's doing the important stuff that you do in an RPG, which is go do a bunch of the side stuff, level up. And of course, I'm like the side guy watching this, and I'm like, wait, but the story's so good. What happens next? Like that's what drew me in. All right. Keep in mind that at that point in time, we were at the very beginning of uh Final Fantasy VIII, we were in Timber, and we were getting that whole setup, and it was so interesting and it was so intense, and I'd never seen kind of a story told this way. I didn't get introduced into Final Fantasy that way. I had kind of a different upbringing. To me, it was like Zelda, Mario, Sonic, Mortal Kombat, all that stuff. And then, I got introduced to Final Fantasy VIII when I was like almost 19. And that was my first Final Fantasy. And it is still going to be, it's not my favorite Final Fantasy. It's probably my second favorite. My favorite is Final Fantasy X. And, oh man, that story was so good. Anyway, but yeah, it was so weird coming up and then getting out of the military and seeing that, nerd was becoming cool. Like, I didn't realize it until later, and that's kind of the weird thing that hits you is like, me and Childers, we went to the theater to go see Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire, and what was it, 2002 was when that came out? I don't remember. I know it probably was 2002 because it was definitely after 9/11 because they took the two towers out of the movie. But yeah, we went and saw it, and there were a lot of people that saw it, and then suddenly Spider-Man was kind of mainstream, and it was like, okay, cool, people like Spider-Man, but they like this Spider-Man. There's like, and you have to get over that part of you that wants to be, I'm better than, and that took a while to recognize that I was doing that and to overcome that. And I still catch myself in those moments from time to time. So the first thing you have to do is catch yourself, figure out that you're doing it, and then try and correct the behavior. Because sometimes just knowing it is a way to start slowly correcting it. And you don't even realize you're correcting it. It's just, oh shit, I do that thing. I don't want to be that person, But I was looking down on people because they were like, oh, Spider-Man, and all they did was reference the movie. And I was like, bro, watch the 90s cartoon, read the comics. There's so much good material out there. And in the way, and I used to look at, I'm better than you because I know all this stuff. Now it's like, it's more of like, dude, there's so many good stories that you're missing out on that don't let this medium, whatever medium it is, whether it's comic books, cartoons, movies, whatever it is, don't let that particular medium constrain you and have you missing out on really good story. I'm trying. All right, my parents are in their 60s. Okay, I am trying to convince them that they should watch Arcane because it's great storytelling, beautiful character, like such good character detail, so much good, like just the way that these characters are so flawed and how they interact with each other. Like it's so impactful. And I'm trying to get my mom to watch it. And my mom isn't big on like animation or CG stuff like that. And I'm like, Mom, this is not the same. Like she still got it because she grew up in that boomer era where cartoons were only for kids, and that's kind of the mindset that she kind of has. And I think she's starting to like change that mindset, but and I hope that she has watched it. I don't know if she has or not, but like that's another thing. Shows like this wouldn't exist because geek kind of took over in the early 2000s and definitely in the 2010s. Geek kind of became mainstream. It was okay to be nerdy. It felt like it was a little safer to be a fan of, but you had to be careful with what things that you were a fan of. It was cool to be like, you guys don't understand. Well, some of you may, and some of you may not, but like there was a time where as a Star Wars fan, you could get picked on just for liking Star Wars a little too much. I read the Star Wars books, the novels that were coming out, the ones that no longer were canon when when Disney picked it up. There's a lot of stuff that I think is kind of taken for granted. And it's not one of these, back in my day, you don't know how good you have it. We used to have to walk uphill both ways in the snow, sideways, with a beaver up our butts. I don't know. I just felt like saying something random. There you go. But it's not one of those. It's not one of those. You don't know how good you've had it. But there's like things that I personally catch myself that I take for granted now that I have to sit here and look back on and go, oh shit, yeah, I used to get my ass kicked for liking this thing, and now everybody likes this thing. Dude, I went into Iron Man knowing quite a bit about Tony Stark and wondering how they were going to portray it, but also knowing how Tony Stark's character is and knowing some of Robert Downey Jr.'s past, his battles with drugs and alcohol and stuff. And I was like, this is almost kind of perfect casting if you think about it, because of the person that Tony is and him having a fight with his internal demons versus RDJ, who was at that time very much fighting off his past personal demons. And I was like, what an interesting way to approach this. You know, it's kind of the same thing with D&D though. Like for a long time, even in like the general nerd culture, you were kind of looked a little. It's not that you were necessarily looked down on, but not everybody played D&D. D&D wasn't a cool thing. It wasn't. This was well before Critical Role. Honestly, I think a lot more people felt like D&D was a bit more acceptable, but like never to the levels that it is right now. And I think Critical Role had a lot to do with that. And bless everybody involved on that show. Whether you're part of the production team, you set up lights, whatever you do, on camera or not, thank you for making it not awkward and not something that I would get made fun of or looked down on for doing. There's so much to cover, and I'm just sitting here like, don't make the video go too long. But like, yeah, man, I'm a really nerdy person. Duh. I'm a nerdy person, and I clearly proudly flaunt my nerdiness. And I want you to know, if you are a nerd, there's no barrier for entry. I don't care who or what you identify as, because let me tell you, this was some bullshit that really irked me back in the early 2010s and late 2000s. This whole gatekeeping nerd culture shit, especially when it came to women, to females. It was like, oh, you're a nerd? Tell me about this, this, and this. And it's like, dude, let the person be a nerd. You think they go to conventions you think they go to comic book or gaming or fucking anime conventions for lols? You think they're going there just to point and laugh at all the nerd people? They're one of us. They came here to just have a safe space to be their nerdy selves. Don't judge them for it. Don't do that. This is the thing that annoys me, is because you're doing the exact same shit to that person that you had done to you. Now you are the bully. Why? We didn't create these places. Like, nobody builds an anime convention to judge other nerds. It's to be around other nerds, make other nerdy friends, and have a place where you feel comfortable being your nerdy self. This turned into a bit more of a rant than I meant for it to be. But yeah, there's no barrier for entry. You like reading manga, you like watching anime, you like checking out light novels. You just are a fan of like the sci-fi stuff or the MCU, DC. Get your nerd on. You'll find no judgment here on this channel. I say that, it sounds like I'm speaking for everybody. I can only speak for me. But I think there are several people here that will agree with me on this channel. I think there's a ton of them. So if you want to be a nerd in the comments, you want to nerd out about shows, stuff that we're talking about. Like, I've got to wrap up Mushoku Tensei stuff because I've got 3 episodes that I can't wait to talk about. I'm just waiting for the final episode and just do a big Mushoku Tensei wrap up. I want to talk a lot about Ranking of Kings because I'm really enjoying the hell out of that show. I definitely want to give my thoughts and opinions in a roundtable about Spider-Man No Way Home, and I want to save it until probably January. That way we've gotten enough time for everybody to have seen it, and we can sit down, we can talk about it, and we could just nerd out. We can just spoiler free nerd out. And I feel like if I give people several weeks to see it, especially over a holiday break, I would love to do that. I don't know who I want on as a guest, but I know I want people on as guests. And we're probably going to have just a 30-minute Spider-Man talk because there was so much cool shit in here. I'm going to see it again. Bet. I'm going to see it again. This shit deserves more money than I can throw at it. I will go see it again. Guaranteed. I want to play video games. I want to nerd out with you guys. That's why I do that stuff on Twitch. That's why I read books on Twitch, because it's so much fun and we're so silly and we do stupid voices and we have a good time. If you haven't checked it out, please go check it out. But yeah, I'm Richie Roberts, and I'm an unashamed nerd. For God's sakes, you can see the Naruto poster right here. That's a custom Naruto poster that was made for the podcast I did. It's called Konoha Corner. If you've ever seen pictures that say Konoha Corner on it by Anria 2002, that's the artist that made a bunch of our stuff for our podcast, Konoha Corner. You can't see it because it's cut off by the bed, but there's another one that she did for our fairy tale podcast, and it's a bunch of us as fairy tale characters sitting around microphones with scripts and stuff in our hand because we used to dub the manga. It was a lot of fun. We had great time with it. It was so much fun. You can see Log Horizon and Slime right there. This is like kind of this whole wall is kind of like a timeline of my life because you've got Naruto, Konoha Corner. It's covered up, but there's a Natsu wall scroll, and then I got Natsu and Happy, and then I've got Naruto and Gaara because I used to cosplay as Gaara, and that's how the whole thing started. Rimuru Tempest in human/demon winged form, and Rimuru Slime Tempest. More. So, I mean, it's just, I've been nerding since nerding. And I'm not saying that to, like, hold that over anybody. It's just part of who I am. It's, at this part, I feel like it's woven into my DNA. If I ever have kids, I feel like they'll be, like, 80% nerd, and it'll be all my fault. But, yeah, the point is, this is a safe place to be a nerd. You don't have to be ashamed of being a nerd. And if at any point in time anybody makes you feel like you shouldn't be nerding out about the thing that you nerd out about, fuck them. That's not how I want to end this. Just know that you've got a bunch of safe, nerdy friends here. And we love you. I'm Richie Roberts of Fat Dog Studio, a.k.a. The Menu. And if anybody's picking on you for being a nerd, it's because they're probably a Dave. All right, peace out, everybody.